What if the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary aren't as solid as we've been taught? Hidden within the pages of history, woven into ancient texts, whispered in forgotten legends, even etched into the stones of crumbling ruins, lie stories so inexplicable, so awe-inspiring, they defy all logic. These are the moments when the divine reached into our world, bending reality itself, a burning bush that speaks but is not consumed, a city's walls collapsing at the sound of trumpets, a single loaf of bread multiplying to feed thousands. These aren't just tales, they're encounters with something beyond human understanding, moments where the impossible became undeniable. And they've left their mark on civilizations, art, and faith across centuries. The fascination with divine miracles isn't just about the spectacle, it's about what these events reveal. They're glimpses into a hidden layer of existence where the rules we take for granted are suspended. Think of the chilling stillness of the Red Sea parting, water towering like glass walls as an entire nation walks through on dry ground. Or the sudden healing of incurable diseases witnessed by crowds who swore to what they saw. These aren't just anomalies, they're invitations to question everything we assume about time, physics, and the very fabric of reality. Why do these stories persist? Because they tap into our deepest longing. To know that there's more to life than what we can measure, that wonder isn't just a childhood instinct but a clue to something greater. Today, we're setting out on a journey through 35 of history's most astonishing divine miracles, events so profound they reshaped cultures, sparked movements, and even altered the course of empires. From the whispered prayers that summoned rain during devastating droughts to the celestial lights that guided lost travelers through impossible storms, these stories aren't just relics of the past. They're mirrors held up to our own hunger for meaning. So suspend your skepticism for a moment. Let's step into the shadows where history and mystery collide, where the line between the earthly and the eternal blurs, and where the unexplainable waits to astonish us all over again. One of the most breathtaking moments in recorded history unfolds in the book of Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea. Picture this: a desperate nation of Israelites, freshly escaped from slavery in Egypt, finds themselves trapped between Pharaoh's advancing chariots and the churning waters ahead. Then a divine command splits the sea open, carving a path through the depths with walls of water standing like immovable barriers. For hours, an entire people marches across dry ground, their sandals kicking up dust on what was moments earlier the ocean floor. Behind them, the pursuing army drowns as the waters crash back into place. It's a scene etched into collective memory, not just as a story of deliverance but as proof that the natural world can be rewritten in an instant. Ancient artists tried to capture the awe of that moment in vivid mosaics and illuminated manuscripts, showing the sea as a curling archway of liquid defying gravity. Maps from medieval times even mark the supposed crossing point, as if the land itself remembered the miracle. But what really happened that day? Some scientists point to a rare weather phenomenon called wind set down where hurricane-force gusts could theoretically push water back, exposing mudflats for a short time. Others suggest an underwater earthquake might have triggered a sudden tidal shift. But what no theory fully explains is the precision, the timing of the waters receding just as the Israelites arrived, then returning the moment their enemies followed. The deeper mystery isn't just how it happened, but why it resonates across millennia. This wasn't merely an escape, it was the birth of a nation's identity. The Red Sea crossing became a symbol of hope for every generation facing impossible odds. Whether you read it as divine intervention or a cosmic coincidence, one truth remains: some moments in history are so extraordinary, they force us to reconsider what's possible. And perhaps that's the real miracle, not just the parting of the waters, but the unshakable belief it ignited in something greater than ourselves. Few events in sacred history carry the raw emotional weight of the resurrection of Lazarus. Here was a man not merely healed but called back from the grip of death itself, his body already wrapped in burial linens, sealed in a tomb for 4 days. The scene in Bethany was one of profound grief, mourners wailing, his sisters Mary and Martha overcome with sorrow, and the stench of decay thick in the air. Then Jesus uttered 3 words, "Lazarus, come forth," and in an instant the natural order reversed. A dead man walked out, blinking into the sunlight, still bound in grave clothes, very much alive. This miracle wasn't just a display of power, it was a theological lightning bolt. In Jewish tradition, the soul was believed to hover near the body for 3 days before departing. By the 4th day, Lazarus's resurrection shattered every expectation. Early Christian theologians saw it as a preview of Christ's own victory over death, while skeptics in antiquity argued it was merely a staged feint, though none explained how a man could survive 4 days without air or water in a sealed tomb. The village of Bethany, just east of Jerusalem, became a pilgrimage site. Excavations there reveal ancient olive presses and tombs cut into limestone, one still venerated as Lazarus's burial place, its entrance worn smooth by centuries of reverent hands. Across cultures, the story took on new shades of meaning. Byzantine mosaics depict Lazarus stiff as a board, emphasizing his corpse-like state, while Ethiopian illuminated manuscripts show him sitting up with vibrant colors, symbolizing rebirth. In medieval Europe, the tale became a favorite subject for Easter plays, with actors rigged to rise from trapdoors to gasps from the crowd. Even today, scientists grapple with the account, some proposing Lazarus suffered from a rare coma-like condition, though none explain how a man could emerge unaided from tightly wrapped bindings. What makes this miracle endure isn't just the spectacle of life conquering death. It's the intimate humanity of the moment, Jesus weeping before performing the act, the sisters' mix of faith and frustration, the stunned silence of the crowd. This wasn't a distant deity performing magic tricks. It was a raw, emotional encounter that forced everyone present to confront the unthinkable. Whether viewed as divine intervention or ancient metaphor, Lazarus's story asks the same unsettling question. If death itself can be undone, what other impossibilities might lie just beyond our sight? On October 13, 1917, in a small field near Fátima, Portugal, something extraordinary unfolded, something that would leave even skeptical reporters scrambling for words. 70,000 people, from starving peasants to hardened journalists, stood in the pouring rain, their eyes fixed on the sky. Then, as if the heavens themselves answered their collective gasp, the clouds tore open. Witnesses swore the sun broke free from the sky, spinning like a wheel of fire, casting kaleidoscopic light across the soaked earth. It plunged toward the crowd, radiating heat that dried rain-soaked clothes in seconds, then soared back up, all while 3 shepherd children who had prophesied the event months earlier stood motionless, their faces bathed in unearthly light. The sheer scale of the eyewitness accounts is staggering. Farmers dropped to their knees weeping. Atheist newspaper reporters, sent to debunk the peasant superstitions, wrote frantic dispatches describing the sun dancing in violation of all natural laws. Doctors examined eyes afterward, expecting mass blindness from staring at the sun, but found no damage. Even kilometers away, people saw the phenomenon, some falling to their knees in roads, convinced the world was ending. The Catholic Church, initially wary, launched multiple investigations. Skeptics proposed mass hysteria or atmospheric illusions, yet how could 70,000 people share the same hallucination? Modern scientists point to possible optical effects caused by ice crystals high in the atmosphere, but none explain why the event matched the exact date and time predicted by the children months prior. What makes Fátima unique isn't just the visual spectacle, it's the lingering questions. The 3 child visionaries had secrets entrusted to them, 2 later revealed, speaking of wars and suffering. The 3rd, still partially sealed in the Vatican archives, fuels endless speculation. pilgrims still flock to the site today, pressing fingers against the bulletproof case holding Lucia's handwritten accounts. Whether divine sign or cosmic coincidence, the miracle of the sun forces a reckoning. Some events refuse to fit neatly into categories of science or faith. They exist in that liminal space where witness testimony collides with the unexplainable, where thousands can agree on what they saw, even if no one can agree on what it means. In a quiet grotto near Lourdes, France, in 1858, a 14-year-old girl named Bernadette Soubirous was gathering firewood when she saw something that would change her life and the lives of millions to come. A radiant woman appeared in the rocky alcove, dressed in white with a blue sash, golden roses at her feet. Over the next 5 months, the apparition returned 17 times, revealing herself as the Immaculate Conception and directing Bernadette to dig in the earth until a spring bubbled up water that would soon become the center of some of the most scrutinized miracles in history. The healings began almost immediately. A woman dipped her paralyzed arm into the spring's icy waters and suddenly regained full movement. A blind man washed his eyes and could see. Word spread, and within years, Lourdes transformed from an obscure mountain village into a global pilgrimage site, drawing millions seeking relief from incurable illnesses. But what sets Lourdes apart isn't just the healings, it's the rigorous process the Catholic Church employs to verify them. Each alleged miracle undergoes years of investigation by teams of doctors, many of them skeptics or non-believers, who pore over medical records, interview witnesses, and demand evidence of instantaneous, lasting cures with no scientific explanation. Out of thousands of claimed healings, only 70 have been officially recognized cases like that of Vittorio Micheli, whose cancerous hip bone regenerated overnight, leaving specialists stunned. Modern science still grapples with these accounts. Some researchers suggest the water's unique mineral composition or the power of belief might play a role, but none can fully explain how terminal diseases vanish without treatment. The International Medical Committee of Lourdes, staffed by secular physicians, maintains strict criteria. The illness must be severe, diagnosed beyond doubt, and the cure immediate, complete, and permanent. Even then, only a handful pass the Church's final approval. Yet Lourdes isn't just about the miraculous healings, it's about the human stories woven into its stones. The grotto today is a tapestry of hope, crutches and wheelchairs left abandoned by the cured, handwritten notes tucked into crevices, the murmured prayers of pilgrims wading through the baths. For every official miracle, there are countless untold moments of solace: the terminally ill who find peace, the grieving who sense a presence, the skeptics who leave unsettled by what they witnessed. Whether divine intervention or profound mystery, Lourdes forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. In a world obsessed with data and proof, it remains a place where the inexplicable still has room to breathe. Stranded in the wilderness with empty stomachs and fading hope, the Israelites faced a crisis that no human effort could solve. Their escape from Egypt had led them not to a land of plenty, but to a barren desert where food was scarcer than water. Then, as morning dawned after nights of desperate hunger, the ground glittered with something unexpected: tiny, flake-like clusters, fine as frost, sweet as honey. This was manna, the bread from heaven, appearing with the dew each dawn for 40 years, vanishing by midday if left uneaten. A whole nation survived on this mysterious substance, gathering just enough for each day, trusting it would come again with the next sunrise. Skeptics have long tried to explain manna through natural means. Some point to the secretions of desert insects like the Trabutina manipura, which feed on tamarisk trees and excrete a sugary substance that hardens into edible pellets. Others suggest hallucinogenic fungi like ergot, which grows on grains and could induce visions of divine provision, but these theories falter under scrutiny. Insect secretions are seasonal and localized, not appearing daily across vast deserts. Hallucinogens might explain visions, but not sustained physical nourishment for millions over decades. The biblical account describes manna as adaptable ground into flour for baking, resistant to spoilage when reserved for the Sabbath, a complexity that defies any single natural explanation. Beyond the question of its origin lies its deeper meaning. Manna wasn't just sustenance, it was a test of faith. The Israelites were forbidden to hoard it, forcing them to rely on daily provision, a lesson in trust that resonates across cultures. Hindu texts speak of Amrita, the nectar of immortality, while Greek myths tell of ambrosia sustaining the gods. Even modern astronauts eating condensed rations in space echo this theme of dependence beyond one's control. The manna story endures because it taps into a universal human tension, our craving for security versus the terrifying freedom of living day by day. Archaeology offers intriguing clues. Ancient Sinai settlements show unusual grindstones that might have processed manna-like substances, and nomadic tribes still harvest similar edible resins today. Yet what lingers isn't the how but the why. Whether divine gift or misunderstood natural wonder, manna's legacy is its challenge to our self-sufficiency. In a world obsessed with stockpiling and control, it whispers an uncomfortable truth. Some provisions can't be stored, only received, each day, each moment, as fragile and fleeting as dew at dawn. The desert sun beat relentlessly on the slopes of Mount Horeb when Moses noticed something impossible, a thorn bush engulfed in flames yet not turning to ash. The fire danced along its branches without consuming them, while a voice from within declared sacred ground beneath the shepherd's sandals. This wasn't just a supernatural spectacle. It was history's most famous job interview, where a fugitive prince turned livestock herder became the deliverer of nations. Artists across millennia have grappled with capturing the paradox of the burning bush. Byzantine mosaics depicted it as a vibrant spiral of gold tesserae, while medieval illuminated manuscripts showed angular flames in jewel-toned inks, often framing the scene with startled sheep mid-graze. Rembrandt took a radical approach. His sketchy charcoal rendering focused on Moses' crumpled posture, the bush merely a smudged glow, emphasizing the humanity of the encounter over pyrotechnics. Modern interpretations range from abstract light installations in Jerusalem's Bible Lands Museum to Bedouin oral traditions describing the bush as a flame with divine words rather than physical fire. Scientific explanations abound. Some scholars point to the Sinai's volcanic history, suggesting a rare gas vent could ignite desert vegetation without destroying it. Botanists propose the Dictamnus albus, nicknamed the burning bush, for its volatile oils that create brief, harmless flares in extreme heat. But these theories hit a snag. The biblical account describes sustained flames lasting long enough for a conversation, not fleeting chemical reactions. Even more puzzling is the voice. Psychological studies of desert solitude propose auditory hallucinations, yet how would such an experience articulate specific prophecies about future plagues and liberation? The deeper power of this miracle lies in its symbolism. Fire that doesn't consume mirrors the divine paradox, a presence intense enough to transform yet gentle enough not to destroy. Jewish mystics saw the bush as a metaphor for Israel's suffering under Egypt, battered but unbroken. Early Christians linked it to Mary's virgin birth, flames representing divine energy that didn't consume her humanity. Even secular thinkers find resonance. Thoreau named his abolitionist essay a plea for Captain John Brown after the passage, framing righteous rebellion as holy fire. Today, multiple sites claim to host the bush's descendants. St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai displays a gnarled Rubus sanctus shrub behind silver railings, though carbon dating places it no older than the 6th century. Ethiopian Orthodox tradition insists the original was transplanted to Axum, while a Coptic chapel in Egypt preserves dried branches said to spark when prayed over. These competing claims reveal less about botany than about our longing to touch the ineffable, to find tangible proof of moments when the ordinary world turned translucent, revealing something luminous beneath the surface. Perhaps the true miracle wasn't the bush itself, but what it ignited in Moses and by extension in us. A man who initially protested his unworthiness became the architect of liberation, proving that transformative encounters rarely leave us comfortable. Whether divine intervention, natural wonder, or psychological breakthrough, the burning bush challenges our assumptions about reality's boundaries. It asks if we're prepared to turn aside from our routines, to approach the inexplicable with curiosity rather than fear, and to recognize that sometimes the most ordinary settings, a patch of desert scrub, a shepherd's afternoon, can become thresholds to the extraordinary. The doctrine of the Immaculate Conception stands as one of Catholicism's most poetic theological mysteries, not, as often misunderstood, referring to Christ's virgin birth, but to his mother Mary being conceived without original sin. This idea didn't emerge fully formed. Its roots wind back through centuries of theological wrestling. Early church fathers like Saint Augustine grappled with the paradox of a savior born from a human tainted by humanity's fallen nature. By the Middle Ages, theologians such as Duns Scotus argued that Mary's sinlessness wasn't a denial of Christ's redemptive power, but its ultimate preview, a vessel prepared by divine grace to bear the divine. Artists seized on this concept with breathtaking creativity. Medieval illuminated manuscripts often depicted Mary as a child standing on a crescent moon, crushing the serpent of Eden beneath her feet, a visual shorthand for her triumph over inherited sin. Renaissance painters took it further. Botticelli's Madonna of the Magnificat shows her crowned with stars, her robes woven from light itself, while El Greco's swirling, almost transparent figures made her seem barely tethered to earth. In Seville's cathedral, Murillo's Immaculate Conception paintings became so iconic they spawned an entire genre called the Immaculate type, copied across Europe and the Americas. These weren't just devotional images, they were theological arguments in pigment and gold leaf, making the abstract doctrine visceral for believers who might never read a Latin treatise. Yet this belief sparked fierce debates even within Christianity. Protestant reformers like Martin Luther initially accepted Mary's sinlessness, but later rejected it as unbiblical, while Eastern Orthodox tradition venerates Mary as Panagea, all-holy, yet stops short of declaring her conception immaculate, seeing it as separating her from humanity's shared struggle. The Catholic Church's formal dogma, proclaimed in 1854 by Pope Pius IX, settled the matter for Catholics but deepened divides with other denominations. Scholars note the irony, a doctrine meant to honor unity becoming a wedge, its very elegance fueling centuries of controversy. Parallel ideas shimmer through other faiths like refracted light. In Islam, the Quran describes Maryam Mary as chosen above all women, purified by Allah and nourished with miracles though not explicitly sinless. Hindu tradition reveres goddesses like Lakshmi, born fully perfected from the cosmic ocean's churning, while Buddhist texts speak of enlightened beings like Tara appearing unstained by samsara's cycles. Even secular narratives echo the theme. Think of superhero origin stories where chosen ones are marked from birth for extraordinary destinies. What makes the Immaculate Conception endure isn't just its theological precision, but its emotional resonance. In a world where humanity often feels fractured by failings, the idea of someone unbroken not by their own merit but by grace offers a sliver of hope. Whether viewed as divine poetry or doctrinal fact, it challenges us to consider how purity might intersect with our messy humanity, and whether holiness is something we achieve or something we're given. The answer, like Mary herself in those radiant paintings, remains just beyond reach, beautiful, mysterious, and compelling enough to keep us looking. Hunger has a way of stripping life down to its most desperate essentials. That's the backdrop of one of the most enduring miracles, the feeding of the 5,000. Picture the scene, dusk settling over the grassy hills near Bethsaida, a crowd so large they're compared to sheep without a shepherd, their stomachs growling after hours listening to Jesus' teachings. The disciples panic. How could they possibly feed so many with just 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish? Then, with a blessing, the impossible happens. The food passes from hand to hand, not shrinking but multiplying, until everyone eats their fill with 12 baskets of fragments left over. This wasn't just about filling empty stomachs, it was a masterclass in divine economy. Barley loaves were the bread of the poor, rough and unsatisfying, while the fish were likely tiny salted sardines from the Sea of Galilee, more seasoning than sustenance. Yet this meager offering became a feast. Early Christian artists captured the moment in catacomb frescoes, showing baskets overflowing with geometrically perfect bread loaves, a visual metaphor for divine abundance breaking human limits. Byzantine mosaics in Ravenna depict Christ holding up the fish like a cosmic key, as if unlocking creation's hidden generosity. Skeptics have proposed theories. Perhaps the real miracle was inspiring people to share hidden provisions. Others suggest mass psychogenic hallucinations fueled by fervor, but historical context complicates these explanations. Galilean peasants under Roman rule lived on the knife's edge of famine. Hoarding food was survival. For thousands to suddenly share without hesitation would defy every instinct of scarcity. Fishermen's nets and stone grain mills excavated near Capernaum revealed just how precious each bite was in that arid landscape. The miracle's echoes ripple far beyond Christianity. Hindu texts tell of the god Krishna multiplying a single grain to feed an entire village, while Buddhist Jataka tales describe the Buddha filling begging bowls endlessly. Even Norse myth speaks of Odin's magic cauldron providing unending stew for warriors. These parallels suggest a universal human longing, not just for food, but for the assurance that the universe isn't ruled by lack. Modern pilgrims to the Sea of Galilee still sit on the slopes where it supposedly happened, breaking bread as the water shimmers under the same skies. Scientists have measured the lake's unique acoustic sound carries unnaturally far here, making it plausible a single voice could address thousands. Whether divine intervention or collective epiphany, the miracle's power endures because it speaks to our deepest anxieties. What happens when resources run out? The answer, whispered across 2 millennia, is as unsettling as it is hopeful sometimes. The math of scarcity is rewritten by a logic we can't yet comprehend. Linen fibers don't normally capture human likeness unless that linen happens to be the Shroud of Turin. This 14-foot-long cloth, bearing the ghostly imprint of a crucified man, has ignited fervent devotion and fierce debate for over 6 centuries. When high-resolution photos were first taken in 1898, the negative plate revealed something astonishing. The faint markings transformed into a detailed positive image, showing a bearded man with wounds matching gospel accounts of Christ's passion. Every crease and bloodstain became hyper-visible, from the scourge marks crisscrossing the back to the distinctive flow from the spear wound in the ribcage, consistent with post-mortem separation of blood and plasma. Medieval Europe was a marketplace of relics, from saints' finger bones to splinters of the true cross, most fabricated to attract pilgrims and their silver. But the shroud defies easy dismissal. Its herringbone weave matches 1st-century Jewish burial textiles found near Jerusalem, and pollen grains trapped in its fibers include species native to the Dead Sea region. Forensic pathologists note anatomical accuracies impossible for medieval artists, the thumbs retracted into the palms from nerve damage caused by crucifixion nails, a detail unknown until modern medical studies. The blood stains contain traces of bilirubin, a compound elevated in torture victims, and imaging analysis suggests the image wasn't painted but formed by a superficial oxidation of the linen's topmost fibers, as if by a brief, intense burst of energy. Then came the bombshell of 1988. Radiocarbon dating by 3 independent labs placed the cloth between 1260 and 1390, seemingly debunking its authenticity. Yet questions linger. The tested sample came from a medieval repair patch, not the original fabric, a fact confirmed by later microscopic analysis showing dyed cotton fibers woven into the linen. Researchers in 2019 identified chemical signatures of bacterial contamination that could skew carbon dating by centuries. Even the Vatican's stance remains intriguingly neutral. While never declaring it genuine, they venerate it as an icon of Christ's suffering, allowing millions to glimpse it in televised expositions. Modern technology keeps adding layers to the mystery. NASA scientists applied VP8 image analysis software designed to map planetary surfaces and found the shroud's image contains encoded three-dimensional data, something no known medieval technique could achieve. Textile experts discovered the stitching along one edge matches that of a 1st century burial cloth found in a Judean tomb. And somehow, the imaged pigments penetrate only the uppermost fibrils of the linen threads without capillary action, as if projected onto the cloth rather than applied. Whether 1st century artifact or medieval masterpiece, the shroud's power endures because it confronts us with the physicality of suffering, the woven memory of a body in agony. In an age of science and skepticism, it remains a Rorschach test of belief, demanding we reconcile faith with forensic evidence, the divine with the detectable. No relic has been so scrutinized, yet none retains so many unanswered questions, leaving every viewer to decide, is this the burial cloth of a crucified teacher, or the most elaborate theological question ever woven into fabric? In the rugged hills of Umbria 900 years ago, a man named Francis, once a wealthy merchant's son turned wandering preacher, experienced something no one had ever documented before. On the morning of September 14, 1224, 2 years before his death, followers reported finding him on Mount La Verna, his hands and feet pierced with wounds that mirrored the crucifixion of Christ. But these weren't ordinary injuries. They bled intermittently yet never became infected, defying the medical knowledge of the time. This was the first recorded instance of stigmata, a phenomenon where the body spontaneously manifests the wounds of Christ, and it transformed Francis of Assisi from a beloved friar into a living icon of suffering and devotion. What makes Francis's stigmata so compelling isn't just the mystery of the wounds themselves, but the context in which they appeared. This was a man who had devoted his life to radical poverty, calling birds his sisters and wolves his brothers, preaching to sultans and lepers alike. His followers wrote of him receiving a vision of a 6-winged seraphim crucified just before the wounds appeared, an encounter so intense it left him physically marked. Medieval artists depicted the moment with startling intimacy. Giotto's frescoes show Francis bathed in golden light, his palms outstretched to reveal dark, gaping holes, while later Renaissance paintings emphasized the raw humanity of his pain, the way his frail body seemed to dissolve into divine radiance. Modern medicine offers theories, none fully satisfying. Some suggest extreme psychosomatic responses where deep meditation or religious ecstasy triggers the brain to produce physical wounds, a rare but documented condition known as psychogenic purpura. Others point to autoimmune disorders that might cause spontaneous bleeding, but these explanations struggle with the specificity of the wounds. The perfect punctures in the palms, though historically, crucifixion nails were driven through the wrists, the lance-like gash in the side matching medieval depictions of Christ's wound. Even more baffling are accounts that the wounds emitted a sweet fragrance, a detail repeated in later stigmatic cases. Centuries after Francis, another figure would bring stigmata into the modern spotlight, Padre Pio, an Italian friar whose wounds appeared in 1918 and remained open, unhealed for 50 years. Doctors who examined him were stunned the wounds bled daily but never showed signs of necrosis, and X-rays revealed no anatomical explanation for the perforations. Skeptics accused him of self-mutilation, yet no evidence of tools or chemicals was ever found. His gloves, preserved in museums, still bear the dark stains of decades of seepage. The phenomenon isn't confined to Catholicism. Similar markings have appeared across faiths. Hindu devotees of Kali manifesting slash-like wounds, Sufi mystics with unexplained burns mirroring their meditative focus on divine fire. Even secular cases exist, like individuals developing unexplained scars during traumatic events. This universality suggests stigmata might be less about doctrine and more about the human body's terrifying capacity to mirror the psyche's deepest obsessions. What lingers isn't just the question of how these wounds appear, but why they captivate us. Perhaps it's the visceral challenge they pose to our understanding of pain and transcendence. In a world that often reduces the spiritual to the abstract, stigmata force a reckoning with the physical, an insistence that belief can leave marks, that devotion isn't just thought or feeling but something that might, under the right conditions, rewrite flesh itself. Whether divine gift or psychological enigma, the wounds of Francis and those who followed invite us to consider the price of absolute empathy, what it means to bear, literally, the wounds of another. Covered in gold and crowned with two winged cherubim, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a sacred chest, it was a force of nature. Ancient texts describe its presence alone toppling city walls, striking down those who dared touch it without reverence, even parting the Jordan River like a divine blade. Carried by priests in solemn procession, this artifact blurred the line between object and living power, its very existence a testament to the belief that the divine could be both immanent and terrifyingly tangible. The Book of Joshua recounts its most dramatic feat, the collapse of Jericho's walls. For 6 days, Israelite soldiers marched silently around the city while priests bore the ark, their trumpets blasting shofar notes that echoed off the stones. On the 7th day, a final shout and trumpet blast sent the massive fortifications crumbling into dust. Modern archaeologists have indeed found evidence of Jericho's walls collapsing outward, unlike typical siege damage, but what's harder to explain is how a ritual act could trigger such precise destruction. Some scholars propose seismic activity coinciding with the ceremony, while others point to the psychological impact of the ark's reputation. Ancient Near Eastern cultures often viewed gods as physically present in their cult objects, and the sight of the approaching ark might have shattered defenders' morale before the first stone fell. Yet the ark's power wasn't just destructive. In Jewish tradition, it served as the earthly throne of the divine presence, the Shekinah, where Moses heard God's voice between the cherubim's wings. Early Christian theologians reinterpreted it as a foreshadowing of Mary, the new ark bearing Christ, but its physical fate remains one of history's greatest riddles. After the Babylonian sack of Jerusalem in 586 BC, the ark vanishes from the biblical record. Ethiopian Orthodox Christians claim it resides in Axum's Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, guarded by a monk who never leaves the sanctuary. While outsiders aren't permitted to view it, medieval traveler accounts describe a golden container with eerie similarities to the biblical description. Parallels emerge in unexpected places. The ancient Egyptian Akhenaten's bark, a ritual boat shrine, was believed to channel the sun god's power, while Greek processions carried sacred chests called cisti holding communion objects. Even today, certain Tibetan Buddhist relics are said to emit measurable heat or light during rituals. Whether the ark's power came from divine intervention, lost technology, or collective belief, its legend endures because it speaks to our longing for the sacred to break into our world, not as metaphor but as unignorable force. Perhaps that's why we still search for it, not just as archaeologists or theologians, but as witnesses waiting for the moment when the veil between the earthly and the eternal might tear once more. On a humid August afternoon in 1953, a humble plaster Madonna in a Sicilian home began doing something no statue should: weeping human tears. Antonina Giusto, a newlywed factory worker, first noticed glistening tracks on the Virgin's cheeks while praying in her bedroom. Within days, the phenomenon repeated before crowds, tears welling from the statue's downturned eyes, streaming down its painted face, even dripping onto the lace cloth beneath. Scientists from the University of Catania arrived with scalpels and pipettes, scraping samples from the statue's surface. Their verdict: the liquid was identical to human tears, salt water with trace proteins, no mechanical contraptions or signs of tampering. This wasn't an isolated case. 2 decades later in Akita, Japan, a wooden Virgin Mary statue owned by a deaf nun named Sister Agnes Sasagawa wept 101 times over 8 years. Each episode coincided with Sister Agnes receiving prophetic visions, including warnings of global catastrophe. Forensic analysis by Dr. Sajisaka of the Akita University School of Medicine confirmed the tears were human serum type AB, though skeptics noted the nun's own blood type matched. The Vatican, typically cautious, eventually recognized both events as supernatural, a rarity among thousands of claimed Marian apparitions. What makes these phenomena so unsettling isn't just the weeping but the context. The Syracuse statue wept during Italy's post-war economic despair, when Sicilian women like Antonina faced crushing poverty. In Akita, the tears began months before the 1973 oil crisis triggered global recession. Believers saw divine empathy. Psychologists suggested collective projection of grief. Dr. Paolo Franceschetti's study of similar cases proposes an unknown psychokinetic effect where intense communal devotion might somehow manifest physically, though how remains unexplained. Scientific counterarguments abound. Some statues were later exposed as hoaxes using concealed reservoirs of oil or water, like the famous weeping icon in Hobbs, New Mexico, which leaked mineral oil when heated by votive candles. Others, like the Syracuse Madonna, resist easy dismissal. Modern materials analysis shows no internal channels or moisture-retentive compounds in the plaster. The tear's intermittent nature defied simple physics, appearing unpredictably, sometimes before hundreds of witnesses, often while the statue was under surveillance. Beyond Catholicism, similar phenomena echo across faiths. Hindu murtis in India have reportedly wept milk or ash during festivals, while in Thailand, golden Buddha statues occasionally exude fragrant oil before natural disasters. Secular interpretations range from environmental factors, temperature shifts causing condensation inside porous materials, to mass pareidolia, where devotees misinterpret stains or polish streaks as tear tracks. Yet what lingers isn't just the mystery of mechanism, but meaning. These weeping statues almost always appear to ordinary people in moments of crisis, never in labs or to skeptics demanding proof. Whether divine communication or psychological mirror, they force us to confront a haunting question. If inanimate objects can weep human tears, what unbearable weight might the universe be carrying? The answer, like the tears themselves, remains just beyond reach, visible, tangible, but evaporating the moment we try to grasp it. The sea off Japan's coast churned with an approaching nightmare in the autumn of 1281. Kublai Khan's mighty Mongol fleet, over 900 ships carrying nearly 40,000 soldiers, cut through the waves toward Hakata Bay, intent on conquering the island nation. Japan's samurai defenders, vastly outnumbered, prepared for a desperate last stand. Then, as if answering their prayers to the kami, the Shinto spirits of wind and sea, a typhoon of unimaginable force descended. The Mongol ships, built for river warfare rather than open ocean, shattered like kindling against the rocks. Waves swallowed entire vessels whole, drowning invaders and horses alike. Within hours, the greatest naval force of the medieval world was reduced to splinters and corpses washing ashore. To the Japanese, this was no accident of weather. It was kamikaze, the divine wind, a direct intervention by the gods to protect their sacred land. Historical records from both sides tell a chilling story. Chinese accounts describe sailors tied together with ropes to avoid being swept overboard, only to drown en masse when their ships capsized. Korean chronicles note the eerie precision of the storm's timing, striking just as the invasion reached its climax. But it's the Japanese scrolls that capture the supernatural awe of the moment. The Moko Shurai Ekatoba, painted shortly after the event, shows Mongol ships tossed like toys amid towering waves, their sails torn to ribbons by winds depicted as dragon-like spirits. Priests at Hakazaki Shrine claimed the storm arrived moments after they'd thrown sacred swords into the water as offerings to the sea kami. Modern meteorology offers a scientific lens. The Straits of Tsushima are notorious for violent autumn typhoons, and tree ring studies confirm 1281 as a year of extreme weather. But what defies explanation is the near-miraculous timing. Two separate invasion fleets in 1274 and 1281, both obliterated by nearly identical storms at the exact moment of crisis. Even more striking is how these events shaped Japan's identity. The myth of divine protection became so ingrained that 7 centuries later, during World War II, suicide pilots would adopt the name kamikaze, convinced their sacrifice would summon that same supernatural deliverance. Archaeology keeps adding layers to the legend. In 2005, divers discovered Mongol shipwrecks near Takashima Island with intact ceramic bombs, some of the earliest explosive weapons used in naval combat. Their presence suggests Japan might have faced not just overwhelming numbers but terrifying new technology, making the typhoon's intervention even more pivotal. Meanwhile, sediment cores from Hakata Bay reveal a thick layer of storm-tossed debris dating precisely to the invasion period, silent testimony to nature's fury. The kamikaze story endures because it lives at the intersection of history and belief. Whether viewed as celestial rescue or freak weather, it forced an entire civilization to confront its place in the cosmos. For the Japanese, it affirmed their islands as Shinkoku, the land of the gods, a belief that would echo through centuries of isolation and cultural evolution. For the rest of us, it's a reminder that sometimes history turns not on the decisions of kings or generals, but on forces far beyond human control, winds that howl with what seems like divine intention, rewriting destinies in a single violent breath. Every year on the Saturday before Orthodox Easter, a hushed anticipation fills Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Pilgrims from around the world pack into the ancient basilica, their faces pressed against the stone walls of the edicule, the small shrine built over what's believed to be Christ's tomb. Then, as the patriarch kneels in prayer, something extraordinary happens. A blue flame flickers to life inside the sealed chamber, passed through a tiny opening to ignite the bundles of candles held by the waiting faithful. This is the miracle of the holy fire, a phenomenon that's been documented for over 12 centuries, with accounts stretching back to the 9th century. The ritual follows an unwavering script. After a thorough search by Israeli authorities to confirm no hidden light sources exist, 2 monks enter the tomb with unlit lamps. The crowd chants ancient hymns, the tension mounting until, often after hours of waiting, the flame appears. Witnesses describe it as cool to the touch at first, even harmless against skin, though it soon burns normally once distributed. Armenian and Coptic Christians maintain their own competing claims to the miracle's authenticity, adding layers of political and theological drama to the event. Skeptics have proposed explanations ranging from clever pyrotechnics to chemical reactions. In 2005, a Greek physicist claimed the flame could be produced by mixing vinegar with white phosphorus, a compound known since antiquity. Yet no one has ever replicated the miracle's full spectacle: the sudden onset, the flame's reported initial coolness, or the way it ignites not just one candle but thousands simultaneously across the church. Security cameras installed in recent years show only shadows moving in the tomb, leaving the moment of ignition frustratingly obscured. What makes this miracle endure isn't just the spectacle, but what it represents. For Eastern Orthodox Christians, the holy fire symbolizes Christ's resurrection light bursting from darkness, life conquering death. Medieval crusaders wrote of carrying embers from the flame back to Europe as sacred relics, while Russian czars sent special envoys to retrieve it. Today, chartered flights carry the fire to Orthodox communities worldwide within hours, its journey tracked like a divine courier service. The miracle's emotional power lies in its unbroken continuity. Through wars, plagues, and shifting empires, the flame has never failed to appear, not during the Crusader sieges, not under Ottoman rule, not even when rival Christian sects brawled in the church's corridors. Perhaps that's why pilgrims weep as they touch the fire to their faces, their hands trembling not from fear of burns but from the weight of connection, to centuries of believers who stood in that same spot, waiting for light to break through the darkness once more. Whether divine intervention or the most enduring mystery of faith, the holy fire remains a beacon that defies easy explanation, burning as brightly in the human heart as on the wick of a candle. Deep in the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where Spanish conquistadors had once believed their victory over the Maya was complete, something extraordinary stirred in the year 1850. In the remote village of Chan Santa Cruz, now known as Felipe Carrillo Puerto, a wooden cross began speaking, not metaphorically, not through the whispers of priests, but with an audible voice that echoed from its rough-hewn surface. Locals called it La Cruz Parlante, the talking cross, and it became the spiritual compass of the Maya resistance during the Caste War, one of the bloodiest indigenous revolts in the Americas. The cross didn't speak in vague prophecies. It issued specific battle commands, warning of enemy movements, naming traitors, even dictating when to plant crops to survive sieges. Its voice, described as both human and unearthly, emerged from a small cave where it was kept, heard clearly by those gathered outside. Spanish soldiers who scoffed at the reports soon faced ambushes guided by impossible intelligence, as if the jungle itself had turned against them. The cross's words were transcribed by scribes into sacred texts called the Words of God, blending Christian symbolism with ancient Maya cosmology, an unthinkable fusion that gave the rebellion its soul. Historians still debate the mechanics. Some suggest ventriloquism by rebel leaders like Manuel Nahuatl, who may have used the cross to unify fractured Maya factions. Others point to the unique acoustics of limestone caves, able to amplify distant voices or create eerie echoes. But these theories stumble against eyewitness accounts, multiple people hearing distinct messages simultaneously, often in dialects unfamiliar to local leaders. Even more puzzling are the reports that the cross continued speaking long after key rebels died, its prophecies growing more cryptic but no less precise. The Cruz Parlante wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a mirror of spiritual resilience. Maya tradition had always seen crosses as sacred, symbolizing the world tree connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. By adopting this hybrid symbol, the rebels turned the colonizers' icon against them, reclaiming their identity while cloaking it in a form the Spanish couldn't easily attack. Today, descendants of the Cruz Maya still guard the original cross's resting place in Zasain, where pilgrims leave offerings of copal incense and honey liquor, listening for whispers in the rustling leaves. Modern scholars draw chilling parallels to other resistance movements, the ghost dance of the Lakota, the Taiping Rebellion's visions in China, where oppressed peoples experienced supernatural guidance in their darkest hours. Whether divine intervention or psychological genius, the talking cross achieved what armies alone could not. It made the impossible feel inevitable. In the flickering candlelight of jungle shrines, where the scent of sapwood wood mixes with gunpowder residue from old muskets, the cross's legacy asks us a haunting question. When a people's very existence is threatened, where else would God speak but through the cracks in their broken world? Naples holds its breath 3 times a year, each moment hinging on a small, ancient vial tucked away in the city's cathedral. Inside rests a darkened substance said to be the dried blood of Saint Januarius, a 4th century bishop martyred during Diocletian's persecutions. The miracle isn't the blood's preservation, but what happens when it's brought before the public. The crumbling, centuries-old powder transforms into liquid, bubbling as if freshly drawn from a vein. This liquefaction occurs like clockwork on the Saturday before the first Sunday in May, on September 19th, and sometimes on December 16th. When the blood flows, Neapolitans cheer. When it stubbornly remains solid, whispers of impending disaster ripple through the streets. The ritual follows an unchoreographed script. Cardinals place the reliquary on the altar as pilgrims pack the Duomo, their prayers rising to the vaulted ceilings. The priest tilts the glass vial and slowly, sometimes within minutes, other times after agonizing hours, the dark mass shifts, glistening as it coats the glass. Scientists who have studied the phenomenon are stumped. In 1991, researchers from the University of Naples analyzed samples without touching the sacred relic using spectroscopic techniques. They confirmed the substance contains hemoglobin, consistent with human blood, but couldn't explain the liquefaction. Some propose thixotropy, a property where certain gels liquefy under pressure, yet the blood often liquefies without being disturbed, even when left untouched on the altar. History intertwines with the miraculous. In 1527, the blood's failure to liquefy preceded a plague outbreak. In 1980, a delayed liquefaction coincided with a catastrophic earthquake that killed thousands. The most chilling episode came in 1944, when Vesuvius rumbled ominously during World War II. The blood remained solid for weeks until Allied bombs stopped falling on Naples and the lava flows halted. Then, suddenly, it liquefied. Coincidence to skeptics, perhaps, but for Neapolitans, the blood's behavior is a divine barometer, a silent dialogue between heaven and their volcano-ringed city. Comparisons emerge in unexpected places. Hindu pilgrims in India witness the spontaneous liquefaction of sacred ash at certain temples, while in Sicily, the blood of Saint Lawrence undergoes a similar transformation. Yet none carry the cultural weight of Saint Januarius. His blood mirrors Naples itself, resilient, unpredictable, brimming with hidden fire. During the city's darkest hours, from Spanish occupation to cholera outbreaks, the miracle persisted, a stubborn flame of hope. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. High-speed cameras capture the exact moment the substance shifts from solid to liquid, revealing no visible mechanism. Thermographic imaging shows no temperature changes that might trigger the transition. The Catholic Church, cautious as ever, has never officially declared it a miracle, yet popes from Pius IX to Francis have venerated the relic, kneeling before the vial as the blood swirled alive. What makes this phenomenon endure isn't just the spectacle, but the unshakable bond between the saint and his city. To understand Naples is to stand in that cathedral, surrounded by the scent of candle wax and murmured prayers, watching a vial of dried blood defy time. Whether divine intervention or a riddle science hasn't solved, the blood of Saint Januarius pulses with something far beyond chemistry, a heartbeat of faith that has outlasted empires, eruptions, and the relentless march of doubt. In the bitter winter of 1227, a young woman wrapped in a simple woolen cloak slipped through the castle kitchens of Wartburg, her arms laden with loaves of bread. Elizabeth of Hungary, noblewoman turned secret saint, was defying her husband's orders, carrying food to starving peasants during a famine. According to legend, as she descended the hill toward the village, her furious husband intercepted her and demanded she reveal what she hid in her apron. When she unfolded the cloth, expecting shame and punishment, the bread had vanished. In its place bloomed a cascade of crimson roses, not the delicate buds of spring, but the full-blown flowers of midsummer, their petals impossibly fresh in the freezing air. This moment, immortalized in countless Renaissance paintings, became the defining miracle of medieval charity. In Botticelli's luminous version, Elizabeth kneels on a rocky path, her golden hair spilling from beneath a crown, the transformed roses tumbling like jewels across her blue robe. The German master Cranach the Elder took a different approach, showing her caught mid-step, the roses tumbling so vividly you almost catch their scent. But it's Tintoretto's dramatic rendering that captures the tension. Elizabeth's husband looms over her, his face a mix of rage and awe, the roses glowing as if lit from within against the stormy backdrop. Medieval hagiographers saw deeper symbolism in the miracle. Roses weren't just beautiful, they carried thorns, a metaphor for Elizabeth's hidden suffering. Married at 14 to a landgrave who alternately adored and restricted her, she'd turned the castle cellar into a secret hospital, washing beggars' sores with her own hands. When widowed at 20, she was cast out by her in-laws, forced to spin wool to survive. The miracle wasn't just about deception foiled, it was divine approval of her radical generosity in a world where nobility rarely touched poverty. Modern scholars note how the story mirrors pre-Christian traditions. The Greek goddess Demeter was said to make flowers sprout from barren soil, while Hindu texts tell of the god Krishna producing sweets for devotees from empty baskets. Even the rose transformation echoes alchemical lore, where base materials morph into something precious. But Elizabeth's tale stands apart. Her miracle wasn't performed for spectacle, but to protect the vulnerable. Today, her legacy lives in unexpected ways. In Budapest, roses are scattered on the Danube each August in her memory. German bakers still shape loaves into rosettes on her feast day. And in Marburg, where she died at 24, her empty tomb remains a pilgrimage site, proof that sometimes the most enduring miracles aren't grand cosmic events, but small acts of love that bloom when no one's watching. High in the sacred hills of Andhra Pradesh, where pilgrims climb barefoot over sun-baked stone, rests an idol that defies gravity itself, Lord Venkateswara, the dark stone deity whose very presence floats on water. The legend begins over 1,000 years ago, when Emperor Tondiman Chola dreamed of a divine command to retrieve a self-manifested idol submerged in the waters of Swami Pushkarini, the temple tank. When divers reached the depths, they found something impossible. The 7-foot-tall black stone statue of Vishnu wasn't resting on the lakebed. It hovered upright in the water, as if held by invisible hands. Even today, during the rare ritual of Abhishekam, priests claim the idol becomes weightless when bathed, its granite surface refusing to sink beneath the sacred waters. Modern geologists have puzzled over the phenomenon. The stone itself, a rare variety of swayam whose self-born black granite shows no signs of buoyancy in laboratory tests. Yet temple records detail centuries of observations. Flowers offered during ceremonies sometimes float under the idol instead of around it, and weighted silk robes drape over the deity's shoulders without pulling him downward. Some scientists speculate about hollow cavities within the statue or unique mineral compositions interacting with the tank's water, though no scans have ever been permitted. The temple's Agama texts, however, offer a simpler explanation. The idol isn't stone at all, but a physical vessel for the divine, unbound by earthly laws. What makes this miracle resonate isn't just the floating stone, but the temple's staggering contrast of mysticism and materialism. Tirupati is the wealthiest Hindu temple in existence, receiving over $1 million daily in offerings, gold crowns, diamond nose rings, even an annual tonnage of hair shorn by devotees. Yet at its core pulses an ancient mystery. Pilgrims whisper of the Ananda Nilayam, abode of bliss, the inner sanctum where the idol stands, as a space where time behaves differently, where oil lamps burn without flickering despite mountain winds, and shadows sometimes move independently of their source. Comparisons emerge in unexpected places. The black stone of Mecca, revered in Islam, is said to have descended from heaven, while Buddhist monks in Myanmar venerate the golden rock of Kyaiktiyo, a boulder balanced precariously over a cliff for millennia. But Tirupati's idol is unique, a floating paradox where devotion and physics collide. Whether divine manifestation or geological marvel, it challenges our assumptions about weight and worship, reminding us that some truths don't settle to the bottom but rise inexplicably to the surface. The crypt beneath the chapel of Saint Bernadette in Nevers, France, holds a sight that stops even the most skeptical visitors mid-breath. the body of Bernadette Soubirous, the visionary of Lourdes, lies almost unchanged since her death in 1879. Her hands, folded over a rosary, still bear the delicate wrinkles of skin, her face serene under a wax mask that only covers what time has slightly darkened. This isn't an embalmed corpse or a clever wax replica. It's one of the most famous cases of incorruptibility, a phenomenon where certain saints' bodies resist decay long after death, often emitting a sweet fragrance rather than the expected odor of decomposition. The Catholic Church approaches such claims with surprising rigor. For a body to be officially deemed incorrupt, it must meet strict criteria: no artificial preservation methods like embalming, a lack of normal decomposition despite years or even centuries in ordinary burial conditions, and sometimes the presence of a floral or celestial scent. Medical experts are often brought in to examine the remains, and the Church has rejected more cases than it's confirmed. Bernadette's body, for instance, was exhumed 3 times over 45 years, with doctors noting the absence of rigor mortis and the flexibility of her joints even decades later. Similar cases span continents and eras: Saint Catherine Labouré in Paris, whose hands remain supple though she died in 1876, or Saint Charbel Makhfouf in Lebanon, whose tomb reportedly filled with blood like liquid years after his death, his body perfectly preserved. Science offers partial explanations. Some incorrupt bodies are found in environments that accidentally slowed decay: cool, dry crypts or airtight coffins. Others may have been naturally mummified by mineral-rich soil or dehydration. But these theories falter when faced with bodies like that of Saint Cecilia, discovered in 820 under Rome's Basilica di Santa Cecilia in Trastevere. According to accounts, when her tomb was opened, her limbs were still flexible, her neck bearing the mark of the executioner's blade, and a faint scent of roses filled the air. No known natural process can explain such preservation after centuries. The cultural obsession with these saints reveals something deeper than curiosity. Medieval Christians saw incorruptibility as literal proof of holiness, a body untouched by decay, mirroring a soul untouched by sin. Relics became conduits of divine power, with pilgrims traveling thousands of miles to touch a saint's hand or veil. Even today, the shrine of Padre Pio in San Giovanni Rotondo displays the friar's body in a glass coffin, his face eerily lifelike beneath his signature beard. The line between reverence and morbidity blurs. Visitors describe feeling not dread but an overwhelming sense of peace, as if standing near a door left slightly ajar between this world and the next. Skeptics point to the Church's history of using relics to consolidate power. How conveniently these miracles often occurred near political upheavals or waning faith. Yet the phenomenon isn't confined to Christianity. Buddhist monks in Thailand and Tibet have yielded similarly preserved bodies, some coated in gold leaf as objects of veneration. In Vietnam, the mummy of Master Wu Sheng, a Taoist sage, sits upright in meditation posture despite dying over 300 years ago. The universality suggests something beyond dogma, a human longing for tangible proof that death isn't the end, that virtue might leave marks even on flesh. Perhaps that's why these stories endure. In a world obsessed with sanitizing death, incorrupt saints force us to confront it, not as decay, but as a mystery that might, under the right conditions, refuse to follow the rules. Whether divine intervention or biological enigma, they challenge us to consider what holiness looks like when stripped of metaphor, not just in stained glass or scripture, but in the quiet, uncanny persistence of skin and bone. The battle raged in the valley of Ajalon, the Israelite swords slick with Canaanite blood, when Joshua, warrior and prophet, shouted a command that defied the heavens themselves. Sun, stand still over Gibeon; moon, halt over the valley of Ajalon. And according to the book of Joshua, the celestial bodies obeyed. For nearly a full day, sunlight stretched across the battlefield, granting the Israelites decisive victory. This moment, frozen in scripture as the day the sun stood still, has baffled scholars for millennia. Was it divine intervention, a cosmic anomaly, or something stranger still? Ancient Near Eastern cultures often described battles in mythic terms, with gods halting nature to aid their chosen people. But the Joshua account stands apart with its specificity, naming locations still identifiable today. Modern astronomers have crunched the numbers. If Earth's rotation truly paused, the inertia would unleash catastrophic winds, shattering mountains like glass. Yet alternative theories emerge. Some suggest a rare annular eclipse where the sun appears as a gleaming ring, creating an illusion of prolonged twilight. Babylonian eclipse records from around 1500 BC show one such event visible in canon. Others propose a solar mirage caused by atmospheric refraction, bending light to extend daylight perceptibly. But the most compelling interpretation might be literary. Hebrew poetry often used celestial imagery to signify divine favor. The Dead Sea Scrolls include passages where standing still symbolizes moral steadfastness, not literal physics. Early rabbinic commentaries, like those of Rashi, read the event as a prophetic vision, a spiritual elongation of time for Joshua's troops, not a planetary freeze. Even though wording holds clues, the verb dom can mean be silent as easily as stand still, suggesting the sun's glare might have dimmed abruptly, perhaps from dust storms or volcanic ash. Archaeology adds another layer. Excavations at the ancient city of Lachish, a key Canaanite stronghold, reveal a destruction layer dating to Joshua's era, with no evidence of prolonged daylight but clear signs of a sudden, decisive rout. Could the miracle have been a tactical masterstroke, an ambush launched at dawn's first light, mythologized over centuries, or something more profound? The enduring power of this tale lies in its layered truth. Whether divine suspension of natural law, an embellished account of celestial phenomena, or a metaphor for resilience against impossible odds, it challenges us to reconsider how ancient peoples interpreted the inexplicable. When the sun hangs motionless in the sky, whether by prayer or physics, it forces a reckoning not just with history, but with our own hunger for moments when time itself bends to the will of faith. May 19, 1940 marked the beginning of an evacuation so improbable, soldiers would later call it the Miracle of Dunkirk, as Nazi forces closed in on the French coast, trapping over 300,000 Allied troops between enemy tanks and the unforgiving English Channel. Disaster seemed inevitable. Then, against all odds, the weather itself appeared to shift in their favor. The notoriously rough Channel waters grew eerily calm, as if smoothed by an unseen hand. For 9 critical days, this unnatural stillness held, allowing a ragtag fleet of naval ships, fishing boats, and civilian vessels to ferry soldiers to safety under relentless Luftwaffe fire. Survivors described waves that barely rippled, winds that died mid-gust, and an almost supernatural tranquility blanketing the chaos. Even hardened sailors marveled at the conditions. One tugboat captain's log reads, "Seas flat as a mill pond, though storms should be brewing this time of year." Meteorologists still debate the anomaly. Historical weather records confirm an unusual high-pressure system stalled over the channel that week, but the precision of its timing defies explanation. Just days before the evacuation, gale-force winds had made crossings impossible. After the last ship left Dunkirk's beaches, storms returned with brutal force. To the men waiting waist-deep in water, it felt less like luck and more like intervention, a sentiment echoed in private letters where soldiers referenced the hand of God, or prayers made tangible in the waves. Winston Churchill, ever the master of myth-making, spun the event into legend during his "We shall fight on the beaches" speech. He called it deliverance, deliberately invoking biblical language, though he privately admitted to war cabinet members that the meteorological reports were statistically improbable. The contrast between Churchill's soaring rhetoric and the raw data is striking. naval archives show planners had predicted only 45,000 could be saved. Instead, over 338,000 were rescued. The aftermath left haunting questions. Why did Hitler inexplicably halt the Panzer advance for 3 days, giving the Allies crucial breathing room? Why did the Luftwaffe's bombs often land harmlessly in wet sand instead of sinking ships? Even the fog that intermittently shrouded the beaches rare for late may seem to lift precisely when boats needed visibility. Skeptics point to the thousands who didn't make it, the blood staining those tranquil waters. Yet those who survived carried an unshakable sense of the uncanny. As one private wrote, the channel was never that kind again. Perhaps the true miracle wasn't the weather alone, but the collision of circumstance and human courage. The way fishing trawlers became lifeboats, how boys barely old enough to shave steered through smoke and spray. Science can map pressure systems, but not the moment when despair turns to hope. Dunkirk reminds us that history sometimes bends at strange angles, leaving even the most rational among us to wonder if every now and then the universe itself takes sides. In a small wooden church near Novgorod in the year 1174, a priest named Kirill noticed something unsettling about the icon above the altar: tears of what appeared to be fragrant oil trickling from the Virgin Mary's eyes. This was the first recorded instance of the Vladimirskaya icon weeping, a phenomenon that would ripple across Russian history like a divine fingerprint. Over the next 8 centuries, dozens of Marian icons across the Orthodox world would follow suit, their tears coinciding with invasions, revolutions, and moments of profound national uncertainty. These weren't passive artworks, they became silent witnesses, their liquefied grief mirroring the anguish of the faithful. The Vladimirskaya, Russia's most revered icon, has wept at least 7 documented times, each episode etched into the nation's collective memory. In 1480, tears reportedly flowed as Mongol hordes approached Moscow, stopping only when the Khan mysteriously turned his army away. In 1812, Napoleon's troops looted the church where it was kept, only to find the icon dry until the day they retreated when fresh tears appeared. The Soviet era saw a surge in weeping icons, often in remote villages where believers hid them from destruction. One in Zagorsk, now Sergiev Posad, dripped blood-red tears during Stalin's purges, staining the hands of those who dared to wipe them. Science has rarely been granted access to study these icons, but the few examinations conducted yield tantalizing clues. In 2004, a weeping icon in Chicago's Russian Orthodox Cathedral was tested by a Northwestern University chemist. The liquid was human tears, but with elevated levels of potassium and magnesium, components not found in standard church oils or paints. Another in Hawaii in 1998 exuded rose-scented myrrh that microbiologists couldn't replicate, its molecular structure unlike any known botanical source. Skeptics point to capillary action in aged wood or humidity-induced resin seepage, but these explanations falter when confronted with the timing. Tears that start precisely on feast days or during cataclysmic events, then vanish as abruptly as they came. These icons serve as more than objects of veneration. They're living barometers of Russian spirituality. During the siege of Leningrad, starving citizens reported seeing the Kazanskaya icon's tears freeze on its surface, forming tiny crosses in the sub-zero cold. In the 90s, as post-Soviet chaos engulfed the nation, weeping icons proliferated, sometimes in train stations or abandoned factories, places where the church itself had yet to return. Political leaders have alternately embraced and feared them. Tsar Nicholas II kept a weeping icon in his private chapel before his execution, while Putin's government quietly funds preservation of myrrh-streaming icons, aware of their power to unite a fractured nation under sacred symbols. The tradition isn't uniquely Russian. Similar cases appear in Greek, Serbian, and even Coptic churches, but nowhere have weeping icons been so deeply woven into national identity. Artists like Andrei Rublev encoded the phenomenon centuries ago in their paintings, depicting Mary's eyes with a subtle gloss, as if perpetually on the verge of tears. Modern pilgrims endure hours in freezing lines to press their foreheads against glass-covered icons, hoping to catch a whiff of the unexplained myrrh or see a glistening droplet form before their eyes. Whether divine communication or collective yearning made manifest, these weeping icons hold up a mirror to the soul of a people, one where faith and suffering, like the tears themselves, can never be fully separated. Among the most contested relics in history lies an object both brutal and sacred, the Holy Lance, the spear said to have pierced Christ's side as he hung on the cross. For centuries, emperors and tyrants alike have coveted this weapon, believing its touch could alter the fate of nations. The lance first emerges from legend into recorded history with Constantine the Great, who allegedly carried it into battle at the Milvian Bridge, crediting his victory to its divine power. By the time of Charlemagne, it had become the ultimate symbol of divine right, so revered that the Frankish ruler was said to have died moments after accidentally dropping it. But the lance's true mystique lies in its paradox, a tool of death transformed into a vessel of destiny. Medieval chronicles describe how it glowed before battles, its tip oozing blood when danger neared. Frederick Barbarossa clung to it during his ill-fated crusade, only to drown moments after losing his grip on it in a river crossing. The most chilling chapter, however, unfolds in 20th century Vienna, where the lance became an obsession for Adolf Hitler. After seeing it in the Hofburg treasury as a destitute young artist, he later ordered the Anschluss invasion of Austria, not just for territory but to seize the relic. Nazi occultists believed it could unlock invincibility, and Heinrich Himmler's SS studied it in secret labs, convinced its power could be harnessed. Yet the lance's story twists with rival claimants. The Vatican's version, housed in St. Peter's Basilica, lacks the infamous nail fragment embedded in the Hofburg spear. Meanwhile, Armenia's Jeghard monastery guards yet another contender, said to have been brought by the Apostle Thaddeus. Scientific analysis of the Vienna lance reveals it dates to the 7th or 8th century, far too late to be biblical, though some argue it's a later casing for the original point. What makes this relic endure isn't just its disputed authenticity, but the raw human longing it represents, the belief that touching an object linked to divinity might grant agency over chaos. Whether a medieval forgery or a fragment of the Passion, the Holy Lance forces us to confront how easily reverence slips into obsession, and how a single weapon's shadow can stretch across 2,000 years of war, faith, and desperate hope. The year 626 should have marked the end of Constantinople. Persian armies swarmed from the east, Avars and Slavs besieged the land walls, and the Byzantine Empire teetered on collapse. Then, as chroniclers tell it, the impossible unfolded. A woman in blue robes appeared on the battlements, her cloak shimmering like moonlight on the Bosporus. Persian arrows froze mid-air, Avar siege ladders collapsed under unseen hands, and the sea itself seemed to rise against the invaders. This was no ordinary defender. Byzantine texts named her explicitly as the Theotokos, the god-bearer, Mary herself shielding the city. She would later be named its protector. The miracle's details are etched in the chronicles of Theodore Syncellus, an eyewitness who described how the Virgin's icon was paraded along the walls as priests chanted hymns. Suddenly, the Avar Khagan's elite forces began screaming about a radiant woman walking the parapets, their war machines malfunctioning inexplicably. Contemporary accounts mention Persian soldiers abandoning the siege, claiming their arrows reversed course mid-flight. Even the elements seemed to conspire in the city's favor. A sudden tempest scattered the Slavic fleet, while the Avars' prized siege towers caught fire without any visible flame. To the Byzantines, this wasn't luck, it was divine logistics, a celestial intervention so precise it reshaped the map of power. Yet the siege's aftermath reveals deeper layers. Emperor Heraclius, fresh from reclaiming the true cross from Persia, formalized Mary's role as Constantinople's spiritual guardian. The city's Blasphemy district became a Marian cult center, housing her robe and belt, relics believed to radiate protective power. Mosaics in Hagia Sophia depicted the Virgin flanked by angels, her hands outstretched over the city walls. Centuries later, when Muslims breached Constantinople in 1453, defenders reported one final miracle: Mary's icon shedding tears as the last emperor charged into certain death. Modern historians offer alternate readings. Some suggest the radiant woman could have been a brilliant tactical ruse, Byzantine engineers projecting light tricks with polished shields to demoralize superstitious invaders. Others note the Avars' sudden withdrawal coincided with rumors of rebellion back in their homeland. But these theories falter against the sheer volume of independent accounts from Armenian bishops to Persian deserters, all describing supernatural phenomena during the siege. Even the Avars' own oral traditions, recorded centuries later, speak of an invisible wall that repelled their warriors. The siege's legacy pulses through Eastern Orthodoxy to this day. The Akathist hymn, a soaring liturgical tribute to Mary's protection, is still sung in Greek and Slavic churches every Lent, its verses echoing the cries of 6th-century defenders. Russian Tsars later adopted the Theotokos as their martial patron, carrying her icons into battle against Napoleon and the Nazis. And in a haunting parallel, residents of modern-day Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, still whisper of a blue glow sometimes seen along the ancient Theodosian walls during storms, as if the city's celestial guardian lingers, waiting for the next hour of need. Whether viewed as divine intervention, collective hallucination, or the birth of a powerful myth, the miracle of 626 poses a provocative question: can belief itself become a force as tangible as stone and steel? Constantinople's walls may have been engineered by human hands, but their true strength seems to have flowed from something far older, a promise whispered across centuries that sometimes the line between history and holiness isn't just crossed, it's defended. High in the monastery of Jasna Gora, Poland, the Black Madonna of Sizestochowa gazes out from her golden altar with eyes that seem to follow you, no matter where you stand. Her darkened face, crisscrossed by scars from a 15th-century Hussite raid, has drawn pilgrims for over 6 centuries, many whispering of inexplicable healings and answered prayers. But her story begins long before the medieval period, entwined with a far older mystery. Why do so many of the world's most venerated Marian icons depict the Virgin with skin as dark as earth or storm clouds? From Spain's Montserrat to France's Rocamadour, these Black Madonnas silently challenge our assumptions about race, divinity, and the hidden threads between pagan and Christian devotion. The darkness of these statues was no accident of aged varnish or candle smoke. Scientific analysis of the Sizestochowa icon reveals layers of intentional pigment ochre and charcoal mixed into the original paint. Some scholars trace their origins to pre-Christian goddess cults. The Ephesus region, where the Virgin Mary was said to have lived her final years, was also home to Artemis, a fertility deity often depicted as a black stone. Early Christians may have repurposed these sacred sites, blending the old with the new. The Montserrat Madonna's nickname, La Morneta, the Little Dark One, echoes Iberian Moorish influences, while Ethiopian Christians claim their own ancient Black Madonna tradition tied to the Queen of Sheba. These icons became lightning rods for cultural identity. Polish lore claims the Sizestochowa Madonna miraculously defended her sanctuary during the Swedish deluge, her face sweating blood as invaders faltered. Haitian Vodou practitioners syncretized her with Urzuli, the goddess of love, while enslaved Africans in the Americas secretly venerated her as a symbol of resistance. The contradictions are striking: a figure co-opted by European monarchs yet embraced by the oppressed, her darkness simultaneously erased in mainstream art and amplified in folk devotion. Modern pilgrims often react with shock upon seeing the originals. The contrast between these shadow-hued virgins and the pale, blue-eyed Mary of Renaissance art couldn't be starker. Some theologians suggest the darkness represents the Bride of Solomon from the Song of Songs, black but beautiful, a metaphor for divine wisdom. Others see a deliberate echo of Earth's fertility, the rich black soil that gives life. In a world still grappling with racial divides, these ancient images whisper a radical truth. Holiness has no color, yet it can wear the face of the marginalized. The miracles attributed to Black Madonnas often carry a subversive edge. At Rocamada, medieval prisoners prayed before the statue. If their chains broke, they were granted freedom. In Brazil, the Aparecida Madonna, a waterlogged clay statue pulled from a river by enslaved fishermen in 1717, became a patroness of the poor, her chips and cracks seen as proof of shared suffering. Even the scars on the Czestochowa icon tell a story of resilience, her slashed cheek a mirror for every wounded soul who stands before her. Science has tried to demystify the statue's origins. Some suggest darkened lead-based paints or the chemical reaction of medieval varnishes. But why, then, are there no Black Christs with the same prevalence? The answer may lie in the primal human instinct to associate the sacred feminine with the mysteries of creation, the night, and the unseen. These Madonnas are not anomalies. They're reminders of a time when the divine was as likely to wear burnt umber as alabaster, when holiness wasn't sanitized but saturated with the colors of the living earth. To stand before a Black Madonna is to confront a paradox, a figure both universal and deeply specific, a bridge between ancient earth cults and modern faith. She asks no permission to exist, her dark skin an unflinching testament to the idea that the sacred has always been far stranger and far more inclusive than our textbooks suggest. Whether viewed as theological statement, historical accident, or divine joke, these icons endure because they hold up a mirror, not just to heaven, but to our own unspoken longings for a God who looks like all of us. The trenches of Mons in August 1914 were a slaughterhouse of mud and machine gun fire, where the British Expeditionary Force faced annihilation against overwhelming German forces. Then, as the survivors later swore, the sky itself came to their rescue. Men collapsing from exhaustion reported seeing spectral archers in medieval garb raining arrows of light down on the enemy, while others described a towering, winged figure holding back the German advance like an invisible shield. This was the Angel of Mons, a legend born from the fog of war that would outlive the battle itself, morphing into one of World War I's most haunting supernatural tales. Newspapers at the time seized on the story, with author Arthur Machen publishing a fictional account of long-dead English longbowmen returning to aid their descendants. But what began as patriotic fiction blurred chillingly into lived experience. Soldiers who'd never read Machen's story gave near-identical testimonies, a captain describing a troop of horsemen in the clouds, a private recalling a golden haze that blinded the Germans but guided us to safety. Psychologists now recognize the phenomenon as a textbook case of mass hallucination fueled by sleep deprivation, trauma, and the brain's desperate search for hope in hopeless circumstances. Yet the timing remains eerie. The alleged apparition appeared during the Great Retreat, precisely when British morale was at its lowest ebb. The story's durability lies in its adaptability. Spiritualists claimed it proved the dead watched over the living. The Church saw divine intervention. Even military historians note that German records mention inexplicable confusion among their ranks that day, though they attribute it to fatigue and faulty reconnaissance. Modern parallels emerge in accounts from other wars. Vietnam veterans speaking of phantom snipers protecting their platoons, or Ukrainian soldiers in 2022 reporting visions of medieval knights during the defense of Kiev. Archaeology adds a macabre twist. Excavations near Mons have uncovered mass graves with skeletons bearing wounds inconsistent with World War I weaponry, some skulls pierced by narrow projectiles resembling arrowheads. While likely coincidental, older graves often resurface in battle zones, the discovery fueled the myth's persistence. Today, Mons commemorates the angel with a haunting bronze statue in St. Symphorian Cemetery, its wings half-folded as if caught between heaven and the hell of no man's land. What makes the Angel of Mons endure isn't just the mystery of its origin, but what it reveals about war's psychological landscape. In the face of industrialized slaughter, where death came impersonally from distant artillery, the human mind conjured a foe and a savior worthy of an older, more heroic age. Whether hallucination, propaganda, or something beyond explanation, the angel speaks to a truth deeper than fact. Sometimes survival depends not just on bullets, but on the stories we tell in the dark. In the quiet cloisters of Paray-le-Monial, France, in the year 1673, a young nun named Marguerite Maria Lacoque was kneeling in prayer when her vision filled with a light so unbearable, she later described it as a furnace of divine love. There, in the chapel's dim glow, Christ appeared to her not crowned in glory or nailed to a cross, but with his chest torn open, revealing a heart engulfed in flames, encircled by thorns and topped with a cross. This was no fleeting vision. Over the next 18 months, the apparitions repeated, each time imprinting deeper what would become one of Catholicism's most recognizable devotions, the Sacred Heart. What made these encounters revolutionary wasn't just their vividness, but the tangible instructions that accompanied them. Christ asked for a specific feast day dedicated to his heart, promises of grace for those who honored it, and an image to be venerated, a heart both wounded and radiant, symbolizing love that persists even when betrayed. The local bishop dismissed Marguerite Marie as hysterical, but the devotion spread like wildfire among peasants and nobles alike. Within decades, Sacred Heart imagery appeared everywhere, from Parisian altars to the seals of Spanish monarchs. The symbolism was radical for its time. Medieval art had depicted Christ's heart occasionally, usually as a small, bloodied emblem. But here was the heart as the very center of divine humanity, not just an organ but a metaphor for boundless compassion, its flames representing the unquenchable intensity of love, the thorns the cost of rejection. Baroque artists seized on this visual goldmine. Paintings by Battoni and Murillo showed the heart suspended in golden light, almost beating off the canvas, while Spanish sculptors crafted polychrome statues with actual glass flames erupting from the chest. Even the architecture shifted. Churches like Rome's Sacro Cuore del Suffragio were built with towers resembling upward thrusting flames, their interiors awash in crimson and gold. Yet the devotion's true power lay in its paradoxes. The Sacred Heart was both intimate and universal, a personal revelation to an obscure nun that became a global phenomenon. It was visceral yet mystical, grounded in anatomy yet transcending it. Skeptics attributed its spread to post-Reformation Catholicism's need for emotional connection, or even to Marguerite Marie's own psychological wounds. She'd endured a childhood illness that left her with a permanent chest deformity, making the heart imagery deeply personal. But none could explain how this specific devotion became a political force, emblazoned on the banners of counter-revolutionaries in France's Vendée Wars, or why scientific skeptics like Pasteur kept Sacred Heart medals in their labs. Modern neurologists might diagnose Marguerite Marie's visions as temporal lobe epilepsy, known to trigger intense religious experiences. Historians note how the devotion mirrored earlier cults of the 5 wounds popular during the Black Death. But the Sacred Heart's endurance defies simple reduction. Today, its image is tattooed on firefighters' arms in Mexico City, woven into the habits of Vietnamese nuns, even laser cut into satellite components by Jesuit astronomers as a tongue-in-cheek nod to divine surveillance. From kitsch dashboard statues to Gaudi's towering Sagrada Familia spires, the flaming heart endures not because it explains divine love, but because it dares to suggest that such love might be as tangible, as vulnerable, and as unextinguishable as a human heartbeat. Perhaps that's the real miracle, not the apparitions themselves, but how a nun's private visions became a universal language of devotion, bridging the gap between the celestial and the deeply, messily human. The Sacred Heart asks no theological sophistication, only the courage to believe that even a heart pierced and scorned can still burn, not with vengeance, but with an invitation to come closer, to risk being consumed by the very love that refuses to let go. The village of Talwandi lay shrouded in pre-dawn stillness on April 15, 1469, until the midwife attending young Meta Kolu's household stumbled backward, blinded by a light erupting from the birthing chamber. Neighbors swore later that the glow pierced their shuttered windows, bathing the entire village in unearthly radiance while birds burst into song as if dawn had come hours early. This was no ordinary birth. This was the arrival of Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, his first breath already shaking the foundations of the world he'd transform. What makes this moment extraordinary isn't just the supernatural light, it's how it foreshadowed the revolutionary teachings to come. In a land rigidly divided by caste and creed, Guru Nanak's life became a living testament to divine illumination accessible to all. The Janamsaki's early biographical texts describe the newborn not crying but laughing, his first words the declaration, "There is no Hindu, no Muslim," a radical statement in an era when identity meant everything. The light wasn't merely spectacle, it was a beacon for what Sikhs call Jayat, the eternal divine spark present in every human soul. Artistic depictions of this moment transcend cultural boundaries. Mughal miniature paintings show the infant Nanak haloed in golden flames while celestial beings hover above his cradle, their rainbow robes mirroring the Sikh tradition's embrace of diversity. 19th century Sikh artists took a subtler approach, using intricate gold leaf to suggest illumination radiating from the baby's hands and feet, symbolizing that true divinity manifests through service and action. Even today, dioramas in gurdwaras worldwide recreate the scene with fiber optic lights, making the ancient miracle tangible for modern worshippers. Historians note intriguing parallels. Zoroastrian texts describe the birth of Prophet Zarathustra with similar luminous phenomena, while Buddhist scriptures claim the Buddha's arrival brightened the night sky. But Guru Nanak's light carried a distinct social charge. Unlike other traditions where divine favor might elevate a select few, Sikhism interpreted this radiance as proof that no soul exists outside grace, whether farmer or king, man or woman. The Guru would later institutionalize this belief in Langar, the communal kitchen where all eat together regardless of background, and in the golden temple's 4 doors, symbolizing welcome to every corner of the earth. Modern science offers possible explanations for the village experience. The Punjab region lies along seismic zones where rare atmospheric lights sometimes precede earthquakes, and mass psychogenic events could amplify a single odd occurrence into shared memory. Yet these theories falter when confronted with the light's enduring legacy. 5 centuries later, Sikhs still celebrate Vaisakhi by lighting lamps in a direct echo of that dawn, not as superstition, but as a reminder that enlightenment isn't confined to ancient miracles. It's rekindled whenever someone feeds the hungry, defends the oppressed, or sees beyond society's artificial divisions. Perhaps that's the real miracle, not a one-time celestial flare, but a light that refused to be contained. From that glowing village to the modern world, Guru Nanak's birth story challenges us to recognize the divine radiance not in distant heavens, but in the shared humanity all around us, waiting only for the curtains of prejudice to be drawn aside. On a humid November night in 1968, dockworkers in Singapore's Sembawang shipyard froze mid-shift as their tea break turned into a scene from a waking dream. A 12-foot-tall marble statue of Guanyin, the Buddhist goddess of mercy, stood bathed in floodlights, except something was wrong, or perhaps something was miraculously right. Eyewitnesses swore the statue's arms, normally folded in serene meditation, had begun swaying rhythmically as if tracing invisible currents in the air. Within hours, thousands gathered, some collapsing to their knees as the movement grew more pronounced, the entire figure now tilting forward and back with the grace of a willow branch. Videos from the era, grainy but electrifying, show crowds pressing closer, their faces flickering between awe and terror, while the statue's polished surface catches the light in ways that almost suggest motion. Scientists rushed to explain the phenomenon. Engineers from the National University of Singapore inspected the concrete pedestal for vibrations, while psychologists interviewed witnesses for signs of mass hysteria. The most plausible theory pointed to an optical illusion caused by flickering lights and the statue's curved contours when certain shadows intersected with the grooves of Guanyan's robes. The human brain, wired to detect movement, might fill in the gaps. Yet this explanation stumbled against multiple accounts from people standing directly beneath the statue who felt vibrations through the ground, or swore they saw dust particles dislodging from the marble folds as it moved. Even more baffling, the dancing coincided with the final nights of the Hungry Ghost Festival, when devotees believed the veil between worlds thins, a timing too precise for skeptics to dismiss as mere coincidence. The statue's composition added layers to the mystery. Carved from Bayan stone, a material prized for its subtle luminescence, Guanyan's figure seemed to absorb and reflect light unpredictably. Modern video analysts examining digitized footage frame by frame noted something peculiar. The apparent motion followed a wave-like pattern inconsistent with mechanical vibration or wind. Neurologists chimed in, suggesting the phantom movement effect, where prolonged staring at high-contrast stationary objects can trick the visual cortex. But none of this explained why similar phenomena erupted simultaneously at Guanyan temples across Malaysia and Taiwan, where statues of the goddess also reportedly danced that same week, nor why the Singapore incident abruptly ceased after 7 nights, leaving devotees convinced they'd witnessed divine intervention. Compare this to other modern, moving statue phenomena like the 1985 reports of a Virgin Mary statue in Ballinspittle, Ireland, where hundreds swore they saw the figure sway. There, investigations revealed the pedestal's uneven foundation created a subtle rocking motion amplified by crowd psychology. Yet, unlike Ballinspittle, Guanyan's case lacked any physical instability. The shipyard statue stood on a reinforced concrete base, its weight evenly distributed. Buddhist scholars offered an alternate reading. Guanyan's dance wasn't literal but a coded message. In esoteric traditions, the goddess's movement symbolized the dance of compassion, a call to awaken empathy during turbulent times. 1968 was, after all, a year of global upheaval. The Vietnam War raging nearby, student protests erupting worldwide, and Singapore itself on the cusp of industrialization, its traditional values straining under rapid change. Today, the original statue resides in a quiet temple courtyard, its base cemented firmly into place. Visitors still leave offerings of fruit and joss sticks, some hoping for a glimpse of the legendary movement, others content to ponder the deeper question the incident raises. When faced with the inexplicable, does it matter whether the miracle lies in the marble or the mind? Science may dissect the mechanics of perception, but the dancing Guanyan endures as a testament to humanity's need for wonder, a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths shimmer just beyond the edge of what we can prove. Dust swirled through the streets of Jerusalem as Jesus knelt beside a man who had never seen sunlight, never known the colors of pomegranates at market or the flicker of oil lamps at dusk. This man, unnamed in scripture but immortalized by his healing in John chapter 9, spent decades begging at the city gates, his blindness deemed either punishment for sin or a divine lesson for others. Then, with a handful of mud pressed gently onto his eyelids, everything changed. "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," Jesus instructed, and when the man obeyed, peeling away the gritty clay, his scream of shock echoed off the stone walls. For the first time, his eyes registered light, shape, movement, the stunned faces of those who'd passed him daily without a glance. This miracle wasn't just about restoring vision. It shattered ancient assumptions about disability. In Jewish tradition, physical ailments were often viewed through a lens of moral causality. Either the blind man's parents had sinned or he himself had sinned in the womb. Jesus explicitly rejected this notion, stating his blindness existed so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Early Christian commentators like Augustine latched onto this phrasing, interpreting the healing as a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, the transition from the darkness of ignorance to the light of faith. But the story's power lies in its duality. It's both a literal account of bodily restoration and a symbolic narrative about perceiving truth. Artists across centuries grappled with depicting this paradox. Medieval illuminated manuscripts showed the moment of healing with golden rays piercing the man's eyes, equating physical light with divine revelation. Rembrandt, centuries later, took a radically human approach. His sketches capture the man's hands trembling as they touch his own face in disbelief, the dawning realization that his world had expanded beyond the textures of stone and the sound of voices. Modern theologians note how the miracle unfolds in stages. First, the tactile sensation of mud, then the act of washing, finally the revelation. This gradual process mirrors the journey of faith, questioning, acting, understanding. The Pool of Siloam itself adds archaeological weight to the account. Excavations in Jerusalem's city of David revealed the very steps where the man likely washed, a mikveh-like structure fed by the Gihon Springs waters. Ritual baths were common in Jewish life, but this one held unique significance, its name meaning sent, a nod to Jesus sending the man there. The location wasn't random. It echoed Isaiah's prophecy of a messianic era when the eyes of the blind would be opened. Yet the most provocative part of the story comes after the healing. When Pharisees interrogate the man, demanding to know how he gained sight, his responses grow bolder with each question. At first, he simply states the facts. He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see. By the third interrogation, he turns the tables. Here's what's astonishing. You don't know where this man comes from, yet he opened my eyes. His transformation from passive recipient to bold witness unsettled the religious elite, culminating in his expulsion from the synagogue. Here, the narrative flips the script. Those who claim spiritual sight are exposed as truly blind, while the man born physically blind becomes the one who sees Jesus' identity most clearly. Modern disability scholars offer a nuanced reading. While celebrating the miracle, they caution against framing disability solely as something needing fixing. The man's blindness wasn't a flaw to erase but part of a larger story. His restored sight became a signpost pointing to divine power. This tension resonates today, where medical advancements coexist with movements affirming differently abled lives. The miracle, then, isn't just about the absence of sight but the presence of a deeper vision, one that recognizes dignity in every human experience. Whether read as historical event, theological allegory, or both, the healing at Siloam leaves us with an unsettling question. What does it mean to truly see? For the man in the story, sight brought both liberation and conflict. For those who witnessed it, the miracle exposed their own limitations, not of the eyes but of the heart. And perhaps that's the enduring challenge of this tale, to recognize that the greatest blindness isn't the absence of light, but the refusal to acknowledge it when it shines. Among the most peculiar relics to emerge from medieval Europe was an object both intimate and theologically charged. The holy prepuce, the foreskin said to have been removed during Christ's circumcision. Unlike splinters of the true cross or vials of saintly blood, this relic blurred the line between sacred and visceral, its very existence sparking debates about the nature of Christ's physical body and its remnants on earth. By the 12th century, no fewer than 18 churches across Europe claimed possession of the authentic holy foreskin, each offering elaborate backstories for how it came into their hands. Chartres Cathedral boasted their version had been gifted by Charlemagne after an angel delivered it to him, while the Abbey of Coulombs insisted theirs was smuggled from Jerusalem by a fleeing monk during the Muslim conquest. Rome's Basilica of St. John Lateran even displayed theirs in a jeweled reliquary, claiming it had been preserved by St. Bridget of Sweden after a vision. The cult surrounding these relics flourished precisely because it touched on a theological tightrope: how to reconcile Christ's divine nature with his fully human body. Medieval theologians like Peter Abelard argued that since Christ ascended bodily into heaven, any earthly remnants like the foreskin must have been left behind as deliberate gifts to humanity. Mystics like Saint Catherine of Siena wrote of receiving visions where the holy prepuce radiated light, symbolizing both Christ's humility in undergoing Jewish ritual and his eternal purity. Pilgrims flocked to venerate these relics, especially on the Feast of the Circumcision, January 1st, where some claimed the hardened tissues emitted a sweet fragrance or even bled fresh blood. Yet the rivalry between claimant churches grew so intense that it invited scandal. In the 15th century, a Benedictine monk wrote a satirical poem about the prepuces multiplying like rabbits, while Protestant reformers like John Calvin mocked the absurdity of competing holy foreskins. The Vatican, eager to quash both mockery and doctrinal confusion, quietly began suppressing the cult in the 16th century. Pope Innocent III decreed that discussing the relic's authenticity was forbidden, and by 1900 the Holy Office ordered all churches to stop displaying purported holy prepuces. Most vanished, melted down for their gold casings or hidden in private collections. Only a few survived, like the one in Calcutta, Italy, where villagers paraded it annually until its mysterious theft in 1983. What makes this relic so fascinating isn't just its strangeness, but what it reveals about medieval spirituality, the hunger to connect with Christ's physicality in a tangible way. In an age where doctrine often felt abstract, relics like the Holy Prepuce offered believers something to touch, to weep before, to argue over. Its eventual suppression mirrors the Church's struggle to balance popular devotion with theological precision, a reminder that even the most awkward remnants of faith can illuminate the depths of human longing for connection, for proof, for something sacred to hold onto. The crisp alpine air turned thick with tension in the year 286 as Maximian's Roman legions marched into the Rhone Valley. Among them stood the Theban Legion, 6,600 soldiers recruited from Christian strongholds in Egypt, their faith an open secret in an empire still hostile to their beliefs. When ordered to sacrifice to pagan gods before battle, they refused en masse, an act of defiance that should have spelled instant execution. But what happened next would transform them from martyrs into legends. A sudden avalanche roaring down the slopes of the Alps with uncanny precision, crushing only their persecutors while leaving the kneeling Christians untouched. This wasn't merely a natural disaster recast as miracle, it was a seismic collision of faith and imperial might. The Theban Legion story survives in letters from Saint Eucherius, Bishop of Lyon, who documented local oral traditions decades later. He described how the legion's commander, Maurice, rallied his men not with calls to arms but with psalms, their voices rising as the mountains themselves seemed to respond. Roman military logs from the era note an unseasonable icefall near Agonum, modern-day St. Maurice, Switzerland, though they omit any mention of the legion's fate. The site's geography adds chilling plausibility. The narrow pass where the massacre occurred sits beneath unstable glacial moraines, prone to collapse when vibrations from marching armies disturb them. What makes this martyrdom unique is its martial context. Most early Christian martyrs were civilians, perfume sellers like Saint Cyprian, or teenage girls like Saint Agnes. The Thebans were professional soldiers, men who'd sworn oaths to both Caesar and Christ. Their story forced the early church to reconcile military service with faith, a tension Augustine later addressed in City of God. Artistic depictions reflect this duality. Byzantine icons show Maurus in full legionary regalia holding a cross instead of a spear, while medieval frescoes portray the avalanche as a cascade of angel swords, blurring the line between divine wrath and battlefield carnage. The avalanche itself defies simple explanation. Glaciologists confirm the region's history of catastrophic ice collapses, particularly during late summer when the Theban legion was stationed there. But the selective nature of the destruction, burying only those attacking the Christians, echoes biblical miracles like the parting of the Red Sea. Skeptics suggest the legion may have deliberately triggered the avalanche using their knowledge of mountain warfare, though this fails to account for why they'd choose martyrdom over tactical retreat. Centuries later, their legacy took unexpected turns. Charlemagne enshrined their relics at Aachen Cathedral, invoking their story to inspire his own troops. The Swiss Guard, protectors of the Vatican, still honor Maurus as their patron, his blend of military discipline and faith mirroring their own vocation. Modern archaeology adds eerie confirmation. A mass grave near St. Maurus Abbey contains skeletons with decapitation wounds consistent with Roman execution methods, their bones arranged in neat rows as if laid to rest by fellow believers. Whether viewed as divine intervention or a freak accident imbued with meaning, the Theban Legion story endures because it grapples with the ultimate cost of conviction. These weren't passive victims but warriors who traded swords for steadfastness, their prayers not for victory but for the courage to face death unbroken. In a world where faith and force still collide, their avalanche resonates, a reminder that some battles are won not by the sword, but by standing firm when the very earth seems to shake beneath your feet. In the quiet Italian town of Lanciano during the 8th century, a monk celebrating Mass found himself gripped by doubt, not about God's existence, but about the very mystery at the heart of his faith. As he raised the consecrated host, the bread didn't just symbolize Christ's body, it transformed into actual flesh, while the wine thickened into globules of blood. This wasn't allegory or vision. The change was visible to everyone present. The stunned congregation watched as the host morphed into a circular piece of muscle tissue, and the wine coalesced into 5 irregular blood clots, each varying in size. Unlike typical Eucharistic miracles where the transformation is fleeting, the flesh and blood in Lanciano remain tangible, preserved to this day in a silver reliquary at the Church of St. Francis. Modern science has scrutinized this miracle like no other. In 1970, with the Church's permission, a team of pathologists led by Dr. Edoardo Linoli conducted exhaustive tests. Their findings, published in the Journal of the Medical Academy of Sciences, stunned the scientific community. The flesh was identified as striated cardiac muscle heart tissue with no traces of preservatives. Even more astonishing, the blood type matched the rare AB positive, the same type found on the Shroud of Turin. The blood clots contained proteins and minerals in proportions typical of fresh blood, despite being over 1,200 years old. Skeptics proposed theories of deliberate fakery, but the samples showed no signs of artificial alteration, and the microscopically visible white blood cells ruled out any medieval embalming techniques. Lanciano's miracle wasn't just a medieval curiosity, it became a theological lightning rod during the Counter-Reformation, when Protestant reformers like Luther and Calvin challenged the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation. The belief that the Eucharist truly becomes Christ's body and blood. The Church pointed to Lanciano as physical proof. Jesuit scholars cited it in debates, while artists depicted the miracle in lurid detail, showing rays of light bursting from the host as priests recoiled in awe. The timing of its rediscovery in the 16th century, just as Reformation tensions peaked, felt providential to many Catholics. Even now, it's a pilgrimage site for those wrestling with doubt, a place where faith and forensics collide. The miracle's cultural impact stretches beyond theology. In Lanciano's annual festival, townspeople reenact the monk's moment of doubt and revelation, carrying a replica of the relic through streets strewn with rose petals. Scientists continue to study the samples, with newer DNA analysis confirming the tissue's human origin, but yielding no chromosomal degradation, a biological impossibility for ancient material. Meanwhile, the blood clots, which should have crumbled to dust centuries ago, remain intact, their weight mysteriously fluctuating during liturgical seasons. Whether divine sign or unsolved enigma, the miracle forces a confrontation with the limits of human understanding. In an age where science often dismisses the sacred, Lanciano stands as a stubborn outlier, a place where a doubting monk's crisis of faith echoes across centuries, inviting us all to reconsider the line between the impossible and the inexplicable. Some truths, it seems, refuse to be contained, whether in a consecrated host or a microscope slide. Imagine a quiet French village in the 12th century, where a newborn silence became the loudest condemnation of heresy. The Christ child of Leon, a baby born mute, according to local records, suddenly spoke with startling clarity at just 8 days old, not with childish babble but with precise theological condemnations. His target, a sect of heretics called the Cathars, who denied the incarnation of Christ and rejected the veneration of Mary. The infant's tiny voice, thin yet unshakable, exposed secret meetings and named hidden believers, his words carrying a weight that sent shockwaves through the entire region. This wasn't just a one-time marvel. Across medieval Europe, tales of speaking infants flickered like candle flames in the dark miracles designed to unsettle the faithless and reaffirm orthodoxy. In Spain, a baby girl exposed her father's adultery by crying out during Mass. In Germany, an infant saint whispered prophecies of coming plagues before lapsing back into silence. But the Christ child of Leon stood apart, his story meticulously recorded by Cistercian monks who saw divine intervention in his sudden speech. The timing was uncanny. The Cathar heresy had spread like wildfire through southern France, challenging church authority with its rejection of material sacraments. A mute infant's voice, cutting through theological debates with childish simplicity, became the ultimate rebuke. Artists struggled to capture the eerie dissonance of these miracles. Manuscript illuminations showed cherubic faces on adult-sized bodies, their mouths open in perfect O shapes as they declaimed scripture. Gothic wood carvings depicted mothers recoiling in shock, their swaddled infants gesturing like miniature preachers. The symbolism was deliberate. These were not typical children but divine messengers wrapped in infant flesh, their purity underscoring the truth of their words. Even the Virgin Mary, in apocryphal texts, was said to have spoken prophetic verses as a toddler, her wisdom surpassing aged scholars. Modern psychology offers tentative explanations. Cases of precocious speech exist in medical literature where children exhibit advanced language skills far beyond their years. Some scholars suggest collective hysteria or selective memory. Perhaps a child's garbled syllables were reinterpreted as divine pronouncements by fervent listeners. Yet the specificity of the Leon account defies easy dismissal. The infant didn't merely recite prayers, he named names, described hidden rituals, and even corrected local priests on points of doctrine. The deeper power of these tales lies in their cultural undercurrents. In an era when infant mortality was staggeringly high, a child's survival, let alone their sudden eloquence, felt like a rupture in the natural order. These stories gave voice to parental hopes and societal anxieties, framing even the smallest lives as vessels for cosmic truths. Whether divine intervention or communal catharsis, the miracle of the speaking infant endures because it confronts us with the unnerving idea that wisdom might come from the most unexpected places, even the cradle. In the shadowed choir loft of the monastery of Montserrat, 1665, something extraordinary shattered the solemn rhythm of evening prayers. As monks chanted the Magnificat, their voices faltered not from weariness but from awe. Floating above their own melody came a shimmering descant, notes so pure they seemed to pierce the very stone of the vaulted ceiling. This was no echo, no trick of acoustics. The monks swore they were hearing the Cant dels Angels, the song of angels, an unearthly harmony woven between their own human voices, lasting through the final Amen before vanishing like incense on the wind. The event might have faded into local legend were it not for the dozens of witnesses, including the skeptical prior, who documented the miracle in the monastery's ledger with trembling script. Stranger still, the angelic melody matched no known Gregorian chant. When notated by the choir's maestro, it resolved into a series of ascending fourths and fifths intervals medieval theorists called the music of the spheres, believed to mirror celestial harmonies. The manuscript survives today in Montserrat's archives, its ink faded but the notation eerily precise, as if capturing a fragment of something beyond human composition. This wasn't Spain's only encounter with heavenly choirs. Across the Pyrenees in Occitania, shepherds in the 14th century reported hearing choral crescendos from empty fields at dawn, phenomena locals attributed to the Cant de la Sibylle, a prophecy song once banned by the church but said to linger in the air like a ghost tune. In Tibet, Buddhist monks tell of Dakini voices singing in unison during deep meditation, their pitch-perfect harmonics audible only to the enlightened. Even Sweden's mystical Saint Bridget described angelic choirs accompanying her visions, their songs structured in 9-part counterpoint, a musical complexity impossible for her era's notation to fully capture. Science offers intriguing explanations. The Montserrat incident coincides with records of a rare atmospheric phenomenon called skyquake, where tectonic shifts produce infrasound that can mimic choral tones. Neurologists point to auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to impose meaningful patterns like melodies on random noise, especially in reverberant spaces. But these theories strain against the witnesses' unanimity. The monks didn't just hear sounds, they identified specific Latin lyrics praising the Virgin's Assumption, words they'd never rehearsed. What gives the celestial hymn its enduring power isn't just the mystery of its origin, but what it reveals about music as a bridge between worlds. From Hildegard of Bingen's celestial compositions to the Sufi belief that whirling dervishes spin in time with unseen choirs, humanity has always sensed music as more than art. It's a language the divine might use when words fail. The monks of Montserrat didn't just hear a song that night. They stood, however briefly, in the overlap between two kinds of listening, one bound by flesh and bone, the other unshackled from time. And perhaps that's the real miracle, not the notes themselves, but the moment when the veil between sacred and mundane grows thin enough to let a single, perfect chord slip through. From the parting of the Red Sea to the weeping statues of modern times, these 35 tales reveal something profound, not just about divine intervention, but about us. Across centuries and continents, they echo the same relentless human yearning, to touch something beyond the ordinary, to find cracks in reality where the sacred spills through. What binds them isn't merely spectacle, but the raw, trembling hope that the universe might still hold mysteries no science can fully unravel. Think of the villagers who saw their wooden cross speak commands. Was it divine intervention or the collective cry of a people pushed to the brink? Consider the scientist analyzing the Lanciano Eucharist, confronted with flesh and blood that defies decay. Does the data resolve the mystery or deepen it? These stories don't offer easy answers. They're invitations to question, to wrestle, to stand like Moses before the burning bush, towing the line between the explainable and the awe-inspiring. Perhaps that's the true thread weaving through each miracle. They don't just challenge our understanding of the world, they challenge how we navigate doubt. Whether you encounter these tales as sacred truth, psychological phenomena, or something shimmering in between, they undeniably shape history, toppling empires, birthing religions, even altering the course of wars. Their power lies not in proving anything, but in reminding us that wonder is still possible. Now we turn to you. Have you ever stood in a place that felt thin between worlds, where the air hummed with something unnameable? Maybe it was a shrine where the candles never flicker, or a moment of eerie coincidence too precise to dismiss. Share your story below, because every retelling, every whispered "what if" keeps the mystery alive. And if these glimpses into the unexplained left you hungry for more, don't forget to subscribe. The past is brimming with unsolved riddles, and we're just getting started. Until next time, keep looking closer. The next miracle might be waiting where you least expect it.